Okay, so, you know the thing that I was least expecting to deal with this video that was supposed to be a nice and easy and simple video about the fascinating pigment Indian yellow? Yeah, it was me almost getting arsenic poisoning. If you didn't know, Indian yellow doesn't have any arsenic in it, usually, but because of an interesting overseas vendor not being transparent at all about what was in their product, we kind of accidentally uncovered a huge scandal with this video. So that was super fun and not scary at all, and I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, roll Rebecca from like 4 days ago or something. Have you ever spent over $600 on something that is allegedly made of cow piss? Well, I have. Give me a second to explain. I promise this makes sense. Do I know this already sounds like an episode of My Strange Addiction?
They call me Tuna Tyler.
Yes. Is it a strange addiction? Also, yes. I promise it is slightly less weird than I'm making it out to be. My name is Becca, and I collect, swatch, and paint with rare, unusual, and extremely toxic old paints so that you can see for yourself what historical colors that don't really exist anymore looked like, without the unfortunate side effect of accidentally poisoning yourself with something like arsenic green, cinnabar red, or in today's case, a paint known as Indian yellow. Which, being real for a second, definitely wouldn't kill me, but would probably make me feel some things that no one else who hasn't worked with cows on a deeply personal level would feel. Indian yellow is one of the most famous and infamous pigments in all of art history. Truth be told, I've been kind of obsessed with it for a while now. The only problem is it is extremely rare, and as we'll get into here in a second, it's extremely controversial, and for very good reason. And because of that, it is super hard to find good, authentic, genuine samples of it. But I found some, baby. Or at least, maybe. More on that later. Indian yellow is also said to have had this completely unique, luminous quality to it, where it almost looks like it's glowing. And yet, honestly, I think that's pretty evident in the most famous painting that it was ever used in, Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. You wanna know a secret? Look super closely at the moon in that painting. You know what it's made of? It's made of Indian yellow. Today, we'll be doing some experiments with some of this extremely rare paint, as well as trying to solve a couple of mysteries surrounding it, including one of the most important mysteries of all. Did this stuff really smell as bad as people make it out to be, or is that kind of an exaggeration? It's supposed to smell really, really bad. But before we do all of this experimentation, I think I owe you a little bit of an explanation about the whole, cow pee thing. Indian yellow was said to have been around since the late 1400s, and it's thought to have originated in the Mughal Empire in what is now Bihar, India. Either way, it was reported to be a popular color in miniatures, which were little paintings often in books or manuscripts, which were used for everything from portraiture to religious reasons, essentially just a bunch of different pictures that were cool. A couple hundred years later, especially as the British Empire moved into India and established the British Raj, India started exporting Indian yellow, and it quickly became an extremely popular pigment among painters in Europe, especially by the 1800s when it exploded in popularity. And this is where things start to get a little dicey. See, although Indian yellow had been exported to Europe for a while, no one was totally sure exactly what the heck it was made of. And more rumors started circulating about this funky smelling yellow and what it could possibly be composed of. Some people claim that it was derived from a plant extract or sap similar to gamboge or woad or indigo. Others said that it was either camel pee or snake pee. Love that. But whatever people thought it was, they were getting more and more suspicious about this pigment of unknown origins, shall we say. Enter Joseph Dalton Hooker, the best friend of Charles Darwin. Yes, that Charles Darwin. Hooker was not just an intrepid explorer, respected botanical illustrator, and the head of the Royal Kew Gardens, the most famous botanical institute in the world. He was also an insufferable nerd.
I'm interested in upgrading my 28.8 kilobaud internet connection to a 1.5 megabit fiber optic T1 line.
He was described by his colleagues as peppery, but also just a huge nerd and lover of all things plants. And honestly, aren't we all peppery sometimes? It's a big mood. So naturally, with a lot of people saying that this pigment of mysterious origin could have come from a plant, and also it being a pigment that Hooker used in his work every day, he was essentially like, I need to get to the bottom of this. I need to know what the heck this color is made of. Me and my beautiful facial hair need to know what the heck this beautiful color is made of. So naturally, the guy just sends a letter to India, which I guess you can do when you're literally the head of the royal gardens. And in this letter, he's like, hey India, please send someone to figure out what the heck this paint is made of. Please and thank you. Love, your favorite Hooker. Thomas Hooker. A couple of months go by, and lo and behold, he gets a letter back from a Mr. T.N. Mukherjee, who's an employee of India's Department of Revenue and Agriculture, and essentially an expert on the products and resources of India. This letter would later be recognized as the only first-hand account in existence of the production of Indian yellow. And if you know anything about art history, that's unfortunately kind of common with some of these rare pigments, is that you have one or two accounts of how it was made, and that is it. If that, sometimes. But anyway, what Mr. Mukherjee says in this letter throws the art community into absolute chaos. But before we get into that, a clever and incredibly relevant sponsor. See, for a while now, I've been wanting to get better at finding and sourcing my own pigments from out in the wild, so that I can better understand the paint making process and share that with you guys. And to do that, I have been following an incredible class called Turning Dirt and Rocks into Mineral Pigment Palettes by Corellia Bloom on today's sponsor, Skillshare. In this class, Corellia outlines every step in making paint from the rocks and minerals around you. From finding the rocks, to grinding the pigment and making the paint, to how to paint with the colors you've made and develop your own distinctive style. It is genuinely so cool. I've already made my first pigment and it is such a gorgeous color for mixing midtones. Like, look at how it's reacting. And what's even better is that even if you aren't interested in learning something like paint making, Skillshare has literally thousands more courses on everything from digital photography to digital illustration to cake making, from some of the most creative and experienced professionals in their fields. The first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan this QR code right here will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today and go learn something. And now, back to Indian yellow and the letter that caused absolute chaos. India Office, November 17th, 1883. Sir, I am directed by the Secretary of State for India in Council to transmit to you the accompanying copy of a report on the production of puri or Indian yellow. By inquiries in Calcutta, I found that puri is made at Mungir from the urine of cows made with mango leaves. Residing at a place called Mirzapur in the suburbs of the town are the only people who manufacture the substance. They feed the cows solely with mango leaves and water, which increases the bile pigment and imparts to the urine a bright yellow color. It is said that cows thus fed die within 2 years, but the puri manufacturer assured me that this statement is wrong. And indeed, I myself saw cows 6 or 7 years old from which puri has been obtained during the last 4 years. The cows, however, looked very unhealthy. The urine is collected during the whole day, and in the evening put over the fire, the heat causes the yellow principle to precipitate, separating it from the watery portion. It is then strained with a small piece of cloth. The sediment is made into a ball and dried when it is ready for the market. I myself saw mango leaves lying before the cows, the collection of urine, and the manufacture of puri. So the real source of this kind of puri is now beyond any doubt whatever. The 27th August, 1883, signed, T.N. Mukherjee. And then at the bottom he talks about the different things that he sent to Hooker along with this letter as proof, including a ceramic pot in which the urine was collected, a bunch of mango leaves, a bottle of the cow pee, which I'm sure smelled great while it was being transported, and several samples of what he called mangir puri, the pigment itself. So naturally, after this letter got out to the public, suffice it to say people kind of freaked out, especially in Great Britain, which was kind of responsible for this pigment blowing up and getting extremely popular in Europe. Not exactly a fantastic look for the British Raj to be promoting a product that isn't super great on the animal welfare side of things. Also, not the first time that the British did something like that. Following this huge scandal, obviously there was a lot of outrage about the animal cruelty of it all, which supposedly led to some different animal cruelty laws being passed in 1908 that forbid making any more Indian yellow. I say supposedly because we don't actually have any record of any of these laws, or really anything that forbid anybody from making Indian yellow. Either way, by the 1920s, the production and export of Indian yellow had essentially completely disappeared. But here's where things get really interesting. From the 1920s to the early 2000s, it was kind of radio silence as far as Indian yellow goes. Like, we really didn't hear a lot about it. But underneath that silence surrounding this infamous pigment, there was a lot of speculation growing about this letter. We had one source about exactly what this pigment was, and we just kind of believed everything and didn't really ask any further questions? That feels a little naive, doesn't it? Apparently, a lot of people thought the same way. So in 2002, an author named Victoria Finlay traveled to this very specific little town in India and asked the people there whether they had ever heard of any process like this, or frankly, anything about feeding cows mango leaves, or really anything about cows peeing and that pee being used for a pigment, or really anything at all. And I joke you not, everyone in this town was like, "Woman, what are you talking about? Why would we do that? Why would anyone do that?" So this was obviously very confusing because this part of India was, according to Mr. Mukherjee, like where Indian yellow was localized. It was this very specific little part of India, and he was like, this is exactly where Indian yellow is made. And everyone there was like, I have never heard of this in my entire life. So naturally, this led Victoria to the conclusion, as well as a lot of other people, that maybe this letter was actually just like a big middle finger to the British government, and that it's possible that it wasn't telling the truth about Indian yellow at all. Because if you didn't know, the British Raj kind of sucked for the people living in India. But wait, there's more. Because 14 years later, scientists started researching this again, and they were like, okay, so it kind of feels like we're back at square one now. What is this stuff? What is it made of? Is it cow pee still? And so they did a bunch of highly complex chemical studies. To be totally honest, I read through and I think I understood like maybe 30% of what they were talking about. But what I got was that these pigments did actually have all of the right markers for what you would expect bovine urine, aka cow piss, to have, especially from cows that had consumed some sort of substance like a lot of mango leaves. So in summary, despite the fact that either it vanished alarmingly fast from cultural memory, or it wasn't actually from the place that the original guy claimed it was in his letter, Indian yellow was almost certainly actually composed of cow pee, and composed of cow pee from cows that had eaten these very specific mango leaves. And that brings us full circle, folks. Obviously, I think we all know why this pigment is not being made anymore and why it's become so incredibly rare. Cows won't live a long, healthy life being perpetually dehydrated and eating only mango leaves. It's animal cruelty, and people pointing out that animal cruelty, as well as the British Raj really not looking so good because of that animal cruelty, is the reason why it was discontinued in the first place, and rightfully so. But that means that now it's essentially unfindable unless you are willing to pay hundreds upon hundreds of dollars for a really tiny dried up sample from the 1800s. Believe me, I would know. So imagine my surprise when I'm scrolling through the internet looking for antique pigments, because once again, this is my hyperfixation if you couldn't tell, and I see this. Genuine bovine yellow. The key difference being that this claimed to be an entirely ethical and cruelty-free version of Indian yellow, where the cows were left to feed on mango leaves just as they wanted to. Which, fun fact, mango leaves are actually a totally fine and acceptable treat for cows as long as it's not like the only thing they're allowed to eat. It's like a cake situation, you know? With this modern Indian yellow, they also claimed that they collected the urine in a much more humane and sustainable way, so that the cows would remain healthy and happy throughout the entire process. Now, naturally, I was a little skeptical, and also naturally, like our good friend Hooker, I am an insufferable nerd who needs to know the truth. So I ordered it. I actually ordered as much as I could get my hands on, which was not cheap. But I would eat nothing but beans if I had to, for the sake of science. And I did this so that we could spend a little bit of time experimenting today to see what the difference is between the historical Indian yellow and this new stuff that claims to be a better, ethical, authentic version of Indian yellow. Because I really wanted to be sure that what I was purchasing was actually legit and, ethical? I decided to reach out to the guy who sold it, an online shop that specializes in creating historical pigments using historical methods, or at least sorta historical when it comes to Indian yellow. But anyway, I reached out to him and I was like, what is this made of? Exactly? I was annoyingly persistent in trying to get the information in time for this video, and he was super nice and responded to me with this. And if you'd like to pause, you can totally read the whole thing. But essentially, he says that he commissions a few small producers of Indian yellow throughout a few countries in Southwest Asia who manufacture it and have it purified into high magnesium euxanthate. Shipments are consolidated with other regional products and dispatched via his shipping agent in Southeast China. Super interesting. Also seems like there's room for a little bit of miscommunication, shall we say? He also said, on ethics and husbandry, I require normal forage/browse with mango leaves and passive urine collection, no coercive practices. That's what they document to me in writing. I have yet to visit the region and would have difficulty doing so to independently confirm this. I have had independent confirmation by other pigment experts on the contents and authenticity of the pigments. Which, more on that later, because we'll see about that. Anyway, he gave me a bunch of different sources about what this pigment was, exactly how it was made, and where it came from. And at the end of this, I said, interesting. I guess we'll have to test it out. So now, obviously, all that was left was to do it. So let's test out that pigment to see how it compares to the real historical stuff. As always, we are starting off with some personal protective equipment, aka PPE. But you might notice that we are going a little bit lighter than usual today, and that's because although these are still historic pigments, I'm not really concerned about things like mercury or arsenic. The main thing that I'm worried about is actually just not inhaling a bunch of essentially dehydrated cow urine. Now let's get into it, shall we? This is a swatch of authentic historical Indian yellow, and these are a couple of tubes of imitation Indian yellow from around the same time period, which is around the late 1800s, early 1900s. How do you tell the difference between authentic Indian yellow and an imposter like this one? Well, the easiest way is with a black light. See, because the urine that makes up Indian yellow is exceptionally rich in something called euxanthone, which is a chemical compound that's great at absorbing UV light, when you shine a black light on it, it will light up like the gosh dang sun with a super bright yellow color. If we look at these fake tubes of Indian yellow underneath a black light, you'll notice that there is a little bit of fluorescence, but not a ton. And most of the fluorescence that we do see is just from the pigment label itself. Like with this Indian yellow number 2, when I scraped out a tiny sample of the pigment so that I could see it directly underneath the black light, it kind of didn't fluoresce at all, which pretty much definitively proves that it's not authentic Indian yellow because it doesn't contain that compound euxanthone. So now let's test things out with this bizarre modern pigment, shall we? So the first thing that you're probably noticing is that this is not yellow. The label specifically indicates Indian yellow magnesium euxanthate, which is a magnesium salt that is rich in euxanthone. So when we put it under a black light, we would expect that it would glow, and indeed it does. Not quite as bright as our other authentic Indian yellow, but still pretty bright. But if we're to believe that this is genuine, ethically made Indian yellow, why the heck is it not, well, yellow? You know? Well, let's make this pigment into a paint and dive into this a little bit deeper and see if we can't figure out what the heck is going on here. But first, a little bit of appreciation because that color is crazy. It looks like it's exaggerating the color a ton on this screen. It's not. It's like looking at this it's almost hard to look at. It's so saturated. But anyway, yeah, remember the guy who sold me this paint? So I contacted him again and I was like, okay, so why the heck is it a red-orange color? And he thinks that it has to do with the amount of magnesium euxanthate as opposed to calcium euxanthate, which makes it more of a yellow color. We have another pigment that is from him that is higher in calcium euxanthate, and we're going to see if that's a little bit closer to the historic pigment of Indian yellow. But I thought it would be really interesting and worth it to try this one as well, because to be honest, it's super cool color. Like I talked about Indian yellow being extremely famous for its luminosity. And this stuff, it is luminous, dog. It is so luminous. But anyway, after mulling it, I put another sample of it on a swatch card, and I put that under the black light, and lo and behold, it does glow under the black light. It's not quite as vibrant as the other Indian yellow, but yeah, it still glowed. But the thing is, a lot of things fluoresce under black light. So I decided to do one of the most scientific things I have ever done on this channel, the good old sniff test. Now, obviously, I am not recommending that you do this with any of your pigments. I do this 100% at my own risk, but it is worth saying that historic Indian yellow did smell, well, like you took a trip to the petting zoo. It doesn't smell like anything. So this is like my historical bag of samples. Oh, that's barn. That's barn. I am so confused right now. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, to be honest. Let me get a second opinion. Okay, I want you to sniff this.
Okay.
And tell me what you smell.
Oh, the things she subjects me to. Anyway, move your glove. I'm mostly smelling glove. I feel like all I smell are your gloves. Nope, not smelling it. It smells like a rubber glove.
It smells like a rubber glove.
What?
At first I was like, there's no smell. All I'm smelling is the rubber gloves. No, it smells like rubber gloves.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not
but the
crazy.
rubber gloves don't smell like anything. This smells like a rubber glove. Exactly
So
like a rubber glove.
Maybe rubber gloves. Yeah, it smells just like a latex glove.
I don't know why.
I feel like I'm back working in foods.
Thank you for your perspective. I was like, expertise isn't right. Thank you for your expertise.
For my
smelling
schnoz.
cow piss. Oh yes, thank you for your schnoz. Thank you for your schnoz.
Yes.
But the sniff test wasn't the end of it, folks. No, because we have one more color to test. So let's see how an authentic bovine yellow looks with a little bit more of the calcium euxanthate. Oh, hello, future Rebecca again, because this is where things all went incredibly downhill. During all of these swatch tests and with everything that was happening, I was under the assumption that what I was working with was either an authentic bovine urine-based pigment, which was, let's be honest, not very likely, or much more likely, I was almost certain I was working with a non-toxic azo or diarylide-based yellow. They're super commonly used for all of the imitation Indian yellows. In fact, I actually have a couple. So I was thinking that these are, even though the seller was like, listen, I'm pretty dang sure that this is real and authentic. I have had the distributor assure me that everything is real and authentic. I worked with another artist and he examined things under a microscope and he said everything was real and authentic. And I was like, interesting, I have some skepticism. But I decided to take him at his word. He had done his due diligence with this pigment to the best of his knowledge. So anyway, I mulled this pigment and I'm noticing, now keep in mind, I'm filming this segment after midnight and I make a horrible decision. I say, well, technically, this is not me working with an unknown pigment. This is me working with a very known pigment. I have it on very good record, exactly what this pigment claims to be, and if not, almost certainly what this pigment actually is, which was like a modern Indian yellow or an azo yellow or a diarylide yellow, both non-toxic. And so I was like, well, surely it's probably fine if I mull this without my mask. This was a mistake. Don't ever do that. This was a stupid choice, let me emphasize. And I'm like, something feels off here. This is not behaving at all like I would expect let's say an animal-derived pigment to behave, a naturally occurring, non-mineral-based pigment to behave. I don't know how else to say this. It was not behaving like I have seen in samples of authentic Indian yellow where it's made of urine. It doesn't behave the same way. It had a completely different level of opacity. It had a completely different smell. Like Indian yellow smells like sweet and kind of like hay, etc., etc. I was like, this doesn't feel at all like Indian yellow. And finally, I did the black light test. Cow urine glows under black light very strongly. That's actually one of the most important identifiers of Indian yellow, as I may have already mentioned. But anyway, it didn't glow, literally at all. In fact, it was like black. And so I was like, okay, this is not Indian yellow, 100%. This is not any modern variation. This is nothing to do with cow urine at all. And so I message this seller and I'm like, hey guy, I think your overseas distributor is straight up lying to you. I'm not sure how they're scamming you or what they're scamming you with, but they are 100% scamming you. Naturally, at this point, he's like, I am gonna try and push forward all of these tests that I was having done on it to figure out if there's anything that we can do to figure out what this is, right? And so he takes a sample of this pigment to some labs. He gets some tests rushed on it. Then, literally yesterday, he sends me this message. Hey Becca, sorry to bother you again. I got the full wavelength data for the yellow and orange, and the lab director matched the yellow to orpiment, and I matched the orange wavelengths to realgar. Please be safe handling these. I know you know proper precautions, so I won't mansplain those. Really apologize for this again. And then he talks about how, well, he just says, I got a UVB light, IR light, and I'm getting an XRF spectrometer for heavy metals so this never happens again, plus either building my own Raman, buying one, or having one of his trusted educators that he knows run all through every single one of his pigments from all of his distributors to make sure this never happens again. And he's like, I'm gonna send you more data on this, etc., etc. And so at this point, I don't know how else to say it. I am crashing out. I am like, the one time that I was certain that I was safe to mull a pigment without a mask, I exposed myself to potentially highly dangerous levels of arsenic. I don't know know what to say here. And listen, the thing that's awesome about this situation is that, thankfully, I was never put in any real danger from any of this. If you are not familiar with orpiment, which is the pigment that I mold without a mask, like a freaking idiot, it's a mineral that's composed of arsenic sulfide, and if you don't know a lot about arsenic sulfide, it's not super water soluble, which means that it's not very bioavailable as a poison, which is not to say that it was not still extremely stupid to mold this pigment without a mask. Although, once again, I had it on good authority that this was an extremely non-toxic pigment. They've actually had case studies where it's been made clear that even if a large amount of arsenic in the form of arsenic sulfide is ingested, that it's not going to cause a lot of symptoms or acute poisoning, which is really nice. And even then, tests that were done on this pigment later revealed that there wasn't really enough arsenic as a concentration in the pigment that it would have done me much harm anyway, unless I had, like, ingested all of it. I hope that you take this as a little bit of a lesson in maybe just being really, really careful and skeptical of everything that you're doing. I'm glad that this situation worked out, and I don't want this to take away from the fact that Indian yellow is such an insanely cool pigment by itself. It doesn't need the threat of arsenic poisoning to make it cooler. So anyway, back to the main video. Now, here's the thing. Regardless of how you feel about the ethical side of Indian yellow and its modern counterparts, it remains one of the most influential and important pigments throughout art history. But because it's made of a substance that is frankly kind of awkward and a little bit unsettling to talk about, we just don't hear a lot about it right now. And I personally think that's a little bit of a shame. I think there are so many interesting and important parts of art history, in general, that just get left out because they're weird or spooky or uncomfortable, and that's stupid. Because that weird stuff is what makes art history so interesting in the first place. It's everywhere. You just have to peel back like one layer of the art history onion, and then randomly you're like, oh, nice. Pink prison experiments, arsenic-laden wallpaper, grinding up convicts into paint and using that pretending that it's Egyptian mummies, when in reality, it was just a guy. But anyway, I think that it's so important to keep in mind some of these more uncomfortable parts of art history. So I hope that you enjoyed learning today a little bit more about Indian yellow. And if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you subscribe to join me on future shenanigans, where we investigate other interesting parts of art history that frankly usually get left out of the narrative because they're too weird or spooky or deadly or toxic, or people just don't want to talk about them for whatever reason. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much to my patrons, and if you would like to subscribe to my Patreon and make it so that I can afford to eat more than beans this month because I spent my entire month's rent on cowpea, then I would really appreciate it. And we do really fun live streams every other week. Sometimes I post bonus content and videos over there. Overall, it's just a blast, and we have a great time. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video, which is guaranteed to not have any cowpea in it. Probably. Maybe. No promises. Bye! So after all this craziness, you guys want to see one of my favorite pairs of earrings of all time? Look, they're little troll dolls from the 80s. They're little troll doll earrings. Isn't that so happy? Don't freaking die, guys. Hope you have a good one.